Hey there. I'm super excited to introduce my next guest. The guy's name is Alex Holler, and he has just been involved in the esports game, basically his entire life. It was actually really refreshing to be able to talk to someone who didn't have that stigma of being a gamer when he grew up. He actually had to learn about that stigma later in life. But this is going to be a really cool one. Let's get to it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today I have a very special guest with us. I have Alex Holler, Esports Director at Cogswell. Hi there, Alex.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic. I should call you Coach Alex, right?
Yes, that works too. I'm used to that title.
Fantastic. So, Alex, why don't you go ahead and begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Coach Alex. I'm currently with Cogswell College right now, and I developed their esports program out there. Before that, I did a few other programs, including Menlo College, and it all really ramped up from collegiate esports back in my college days, and it sort of followed me around, and I've stuck with it all this time.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to start off season 2 the same way I normally would season 1. Asking a specific question that I ask all of my guests. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you, Alex?
How weird am I? Yeah, I'd say I'm a solid 8. I'm a solid 8. Yeah.
Why is that?
I I guess growing up around gamers and online communities, I really didn't get any of that social suppression that I guess a lot of people did growing up, and that sense of like, oh, I've got to not show people my weird side, and so it sort of flourished. So yeah, I think I'm a little atypical, but not too far out the spectrum.
Wonderful. And we'll have to talk about that because you and I had this discussion before, and you obviously had a different upbringing than I did. So before we get there, though, this is the Gamerpreneur. I need your gaming cred. I know just because you're an esports director doesn't mean you know jack. So what first led you to play video games?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so both my parents were gamers, and it's actually really funny. Originally, my mom didn't want me playing anything electronic, any video games, anything like that. And so till I was like 7, I hadn't played any games, and then my uncle fudged it up by giving me a Game Boy Color and Pokemon Yellow. And after that, there was a nonstop. I don't think I've gone without playing some form of game or another since then. So I've been super actively involved ever since that Game Boy Yellow hit my hands.
Fantastic. All right, what do you play now, if anything?
Yeah, no, I play a lot right now. I play primarily League of Legends, Valorant, and Overwatch are the games that I coach, so I always have to stay up and current on those. But as far as at home or for pleasure, I like a lot of the single-player high fantasy titles, like maybe The Witcher 3, Skyrim, stuff like that.
Do you even have time to play games like that, though?
That's funny that you ask. It's actually an ongoing joke with my students that with coaching, I don't actually have as much time to play as perceptively you'd think from the outside. A lot of my time is spent, like you sort of insinuated, learning the games or coaching or doing research or stuff like that. So yeah, no, I actually don't get a whole lot of time, but when I do, I like to spend it where I can.
Isn't that a little ironic that you're teaching people how to play video games and you don't have time to play yourself?
Oh yeah, no, it's very ironic. It's an ongoing topic for sure. I think the perception of anybody that works in gaming is, oh, well, you just sit around and play games, and it's just sort of like, well, actually, I don't get nearly as much time to play games as you might think.
Okay, now, all-time favorite game.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I don't want to get any hate for this. All-time favorite? I'm probably going to have to play it safe and say Pokemon Yellow. I mean, anything that can influence your life enough to get it tattooed on your body. And it was my first game, and it was probably the most influential for me.
Okay, what did you get tattooed, if you don't mind me asking? Or is that not
No, it's the red and Pikachu on my inner arm here in the 8-bit style.
I love it. That's
definitely
fantastic.
definitely a big fan of Pokemon Yellow. It's actually really funny though, because sort of like you said about getting the opportunity to play these games, I hadn't played a bunch of Pokemon games until Shield just came out, and I got a chance to play that right before the whole virus situation.
Okay. Slightly different question than the favorite game. Desert Island, you get one game the rest of your life. You got a power cable and Ethernet cable. What is it?
Oof, one game. So replayability has to come into factor here. I'd probably say League of Legends. It's been the game that I've been involved in the longest consistently. It's the game that was my first, coaching experience game. It's the game that I have a love-hate relationship with, but definitely super high replayability.
Fantastic. Okay, now let's get over to the preneur part. I want to know your business, your professional background. That way we kind of understand how you became a coach.
Sure, yeah. No, originally I got my degree in communication. I then went on to intern at a company called Evisys. It was a streaming platform. I think it got rebranded to Cast now. But I worked for them for a period of time. And while I was working for them, I was doing a lot of community management with people in the collegiate atmosphere to either try out the product and test it or promote it, very grassroots sort of nature. And I started realizing more and more that I was really good at and enjoyed being that sort of middle communication point between, collegiate and teenage gamers and the company end. And so I applied that, then going forward to another streaming platform that was mobile, and then eventually directing the esports programs and creating them with colleges, sort of where I've landed.
Okay. And how did you end up with Cogswell?
Sure. Yeah. No, I was working with Menlo. We were wrapping up essentially what was the launch, and I had gotten a lot of word out about that I was in the area. I was doing it well. I knew what I was doing, and it sort of has a ripple effect whenever you do something well, I think, and that you show passion for it. And so it sort of got to Cogswell's ears that I had done it before, that is something that they were interested in. And so I went down to interview, and it was a pretty immediate click. And they were like, yeah, this is perfect. Let's do this. And I felt the same.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what exactly does an esports director do?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a role with many hats. I think that the some of the prime directives, for me at least, is that when I come into a program, it's usually that they don't have a current establishment, right? They have an idea maybe, but haven't really built on it. They're not really sure what the correct way to build is. So first thing I'll do is I'll look at the space and say what I recommend to do within the space, whether you can fit X amount of computers or whether you want to try to move to a different space. I then work with sponsors to help build out the space. So whether it's computers, whether it's monitors, whether it's peripherals, whatever. And we try to get the room outfitted as well as we can for the budget that we have allocated. And then the next part is building for the students. I firmly believe as a coach that you have to look at what your desired outcomes are for your program, because if you build generally and try to just say, yes, we want everything, you're just going to end up doing everything okay. Versus if you can specialize in and what you want as your desired outcomes from the beginning, you can build a roadmap that's a lot more clear. And for Cogswell, that's about 1, competitive viability, and 2, student happiness. It's a half and half investment. It's not an all in on we've got to win, otherwise we're all out. It's a community. And that's really my happy point as a coach as well, is trying to maintain competitive viability, obviously, but it's got to be a family. Otherwise, people are feeling like they're punching in and punching out, and people don't want to be there at the end of the day.
Okay, wonderful. Now, I get asked this question all the time, and maybe you can kind of give us an answer. What does it mean to be a coach?
What does it mean to be a coach? That's a good question. I feel like for me, I guess I can only really answer for myself, because I think overall coaching is such a broad topic. But for me specifically, it's several different elements. Number one, can I develop the player, right? Their game itself. Can I develop them in their game? That's the very first thing that people think about. Number two, I think that's a lesser element for people who haven't been coached or haven't had a coach or haven't been a coach. It would be to help develop the player as a person. And I think that that's underlooked a lot of times. I think that to all of my players, I aim to be a role model. I aim to be, a mama bird. I aim to be somebody that they can reach out to, not just about gaming, not just about coaching, but about life. And I've done that a lot with my players. I've had workshops on credit score. I've had people who have come to me even during, this pandemic situation, be like, hey, I didn't get any toilet paper. Do you know where I can get any? Coach would be like, yeah, I got extra. I got you. And establishing that sort of relationship with your players, I think is critical, because if they can trust you with more than just the game, then they're going to respect you and they're going to listen to you and whatever you have to say to them.
Okay, wonderful. So you wear two very different hats, one dealing with the administration, one dealing with the actual students.
Absolutely.
What unique skills do you think you have that help you be able to handle that?
I think there's a lot of things that come into play. I think number one, I think I got a sweet spot generationally. I think that, as a millennial, I've got the lingo, I've developed the interpersonal skills that fit very well with younger generations. And I've also had enough training and enough background working with businesses that I can speak business as well, if you will. And so being that communicative point between those two groups has been my career. And so being able to understand how a business leader or how a business itself has to function, has to think, has to operate around their KPI, and then understanding how to translate that back and forth between, either a gaming populace of students or a gaming populace of maybe a community has been the real niche for me.
Absolutely. And what exactly did you do to be able to study all this? You weren't just pop out of the womb knowing all this.
Yeah, no, I think that first and foremost, I think the big thing for me was deciding what I wanted to get out of college. I think that I'm a firm believer in a college degree. I think there's definitely ways you can do it without, but it puts so much extra strain trying to learn those things under your own weight. But number one for me was I had a really amazing advisor in college who said, hey, Alex, what you want to do, what your passion is, doesn't have a specific degree right now, right? Gaming was just barely starting to be acceptable at the point that I had to declare a major. And it was getting to the point where I was like, well, what am I good at already? And some of the things that peers and family had guided me towards was communication, that I'd always been a natural interpersonal communicator. And so I sort of decided to ramp on that as a base and realized that I was going to get a communications degree, and I was going to really have to take those skills that I was learning and apply them myself. It's not something you can lean on. It's something you have to use to build yourself up. And from there, I got really lucky, to be completely honest, with it, experience after experience that I got, doing what I loved and just naturally generating, either interests or people around me, and then sort of the perfect storm of situations and TESPA and all these other organizations that just sort of got to me where I am.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay, now you've been at this for a few years. You're a few years younger than I am, but like you said, you were getting lucky along the way. What do you wish you had known way back at the beginning when you first started off on this journey that you now know?
Oh yeah, networking. Networking. I think that networking is one of those things that when you're the little person in the scenario, you feel really awkward and you're like, nobody wants to connect with me. Like I can't offer them anything. And I think it can be true, but for a lot of people, networking is so vital, and the connections you make can get you so far. And don't be afraid of going out there and networking in anything, in an event, online, on LinkedIn, whatever, because yeah, some people might be, not terribly polite, but there's so many people that I never would have expected originally that took me so much farther via just networking and just trying to put yourself out there. Because it's sort of that old adage of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Okay. Now, do you have any advice for, say, like a 22-year-old right out of college who may want to go that esports route, maybe be a director at college somewhere? What would you tell that person to be able to take that path?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that number one thing that is most overlooked for a new college grad, for me specifically, that I've seen, is that you've got to remember that you've got to speak the language of the people who are hiring you. Even if you know every single in and out of a game, even if you'd make the best coach in the world, if you can't explain the way you're going to leverage it from the business side, they're never going to hire you, and you're never going to get that opportunity to prove that you're the best, So number one, in any communication, know your audience and know the language or the lingo or the jargon that is needed to be able to explain and sell yourself to your audience.
All right, wonderful. Now, you are at the forefront of the gaming industry, right there at college. As these kids are becoming professional, really. Where do you see this industry going in the next 5 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that number one thing I would say with relative certainty is that it's definitely latched on, and people are definitely accepting it and definitely reacting to it from a market standpoint, in the sense of education is changing, jobs are changing. So I could imagine that in 5 years, I would bet that traditional sports and esports are just right there with each other, especially in the current times and the current environment and atmosphere we have here. You've got major sports networks, basically clearing their slate as far as what they have as content, and esports is just chugging right along. So I think that number one, college degrees are going to come of this, period, because you have enough people that are like me who are seeking that sort of like ability to pass along the information that they learned the hard way to the next generation in an easier format. And there's a market for it. And then how that translates into jobs and what you see as a result from it could change. Obviously, I'm not going to say I'm a fortune teller, but I think the primary thing is that you're going to see it be on par with traditional sports and follow a lot of the same pathways.
Hopefully. I'd love to see it more on ESPN.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want to talk about you as a person, if we can. Pull back a little off of the gaming and esports, and more about you and what you've been through. So you've had some fantastic success in your life. You credit it largely to luck and being in the right place at the right time. But you can't sell yourself short. However, I want to look at the flip side of that coin, because a lot of success, if we look at only people's success, we don't really learn the lessons that they learned. So if I can I ask you, what is your greatest failure?
Oh, my greatest failure. Oh, geez, that's so many to choose from. I think my greatest failure is probably when I was in college. I was a gaming leader for a club that ended up getting much bigger. I think my greatest failure was, at the time, I was too, it sounds like one of those dumb cliches, but I was too ambitious. I was too much looking forward at what I wanted something to be, and I didn't spend enough time looking at what my needs were, what my community's needs were in the moment. I built us out a structure that was incredibly built for scaling, right? It was amazing. It was going to be that, like, in 5 years from then type of thing, it would be 1,000, multi-thousand person community. And I focused so incredibly hard on doing it in a way that was super scalable that I didn't pay enough attention to my current community's needs, and it ended up hamstringing the potential growth. because I essentially shunned away a portion of my community, and that was a really bad really bad choice for me, because as much as you can be ambitious, or as much as you can be looking towards that future moment, if you lose touch with the present and what you have then, you're not going to have any of that foundation to go for the future.
That is some fantastic advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
continuing on the same line of thinking, what is something that you're not very good at, and what are you working to improve in yourself?
Not very good at. I've gotten so good at the things that I do now that it's sort of funny to think about. I'm not very good at talking to a generation that has zero exposure to technology. If I think about my grandparents' generation and trying to explain to them what it is that I do, not using any technological terms, it's sort of hard. Like, you have to have some base level of talking about, if you can think about it from this point of, the internet, and that's how we play online. And so you get on the Googles to coach? And there's a certain disconnect at some point where my wheelhouse is so heavily based in technology that talking to people who don't understand technology can be difficult.
Absolutely. And again, what are you working to improve on in yourself?
Yeah, I think that largely from a communications background standpoint, I think that I always strive to be able to get further and further and further within that communication of understanding and explaining what it is I do, what it is I want to do. I've been working really, really hard with metaphors. My dad has been a great role model for me as far as communicating to people through metaphor. So when they don't understand maybe the subject matter that you're talking about, being able to think of it in different terms, being able to take something and explain it to somebody who knows absolutely nothing, something that I work on regularly. And, I think that I've gotten really good at taking the experience from esports specifically and saying, hey, this is why esports is super viable. This is why it's important from a business standpoint, from a community standpoint. And I think expanding that out to more topics beyond my immediate, field, being able to communicate effectively, period, is something that I think is an ongoing life journey. I don't think that anybody can say that, oh yeah, well, I'm just the perfect communicator, period, to every audience. And so I think that that's something that I definitely consistently work on doing better and improving.
Wonderful. All right. And you can say there's people out there not saying those things, but there are.
Yeah,
they're not getting anywhere. So this has been an absolutely wonderful interview. Thank you so much, Coach Alex. How do people find you? Where are you out on social media?
Thank you. Yeah, no, on social media, the best way to find me is actually through Discord, ironically. That would be RORSHOK #4348. And also I have a Twitter that I rarely get to use because I'm working so much. That would be at Alex LHOLLER.
Okay, wonderful. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to talk about, or anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
No, the big thing that I'd say to any potential listeners, regardless of what you're interested in, as far as, your interest in esports or technology or business, it would be to just really go out there and do it. I think that there's so many people that get held back by the what ifs, I don't want to fails, and open yourself up to failure and you will find success.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, Coach Alex, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And on that note, I will remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.